What if one of the most photographed women in Europe spent her entire life hiding heartbreak behind perfect smiles, elegant fashion, and royal duty? To the world, Princess Caroline of Monaco looked like living proof that fairy tales were real: palaces, glamour, luxury, endless admiration. But behind those dazzling public appearances was a life shaped by pressure, loneliness, tragedy, and emotional scars few people ever truly understood. And the deeper this story goes, the more shocking it becomes. Princess Caroline was born on January 23, 1957, inside Monaco's royal palace. From the very beginning, her life carried enormous importance. Monaco was tiny, wealthy, and glamorous, but the royal family faced serious pressure to protect the future of the country. One missing heir could have changed everything. Even Caroline's exact birth time was carefully recorded, because succession rules mattered that much. Imagine entering the world already carrying the expectations of an entire nation. Sounds exhausting, doesn't it? Her father, Prince Rainier III, worked constantly to transform Monaco into a global symbol of luxury. Casinos, tourism, glamorous events, and wealthy visitors became central to his mission. Meanwhile, her mother, Grace Kelly, had left behind Hollywood fame to become a princess. From the outside, their marriage looked magical. Magazine covers painted them as the perfect royal couple. But life inside palace walls was often far colder than people imagined. Royal life followed strict routines. Formality came before emotion. Nannies handled much of the daily childcare. Meals were often separate. Public image mattered more than warmth. Caroline grew up learning that every movement carried meaning. Every smile mattered. Every appearance would be judged. And things became even more complicated when her younger brother, Prince Albert, was born in 1958. Before Albert arrived, Caroline stood much closer to the center of Monaco's future. But once a male heir existed, attention naturally shifted toward him. Caroline remained important, of course, but expectations changed. She was no longer viewed as the possible future ruler. Instead, she was expected to represent elegance, intelligence, and royal perfection. That kind of shift can quietly affect a child in ways nobody fully sees. But here's where things became even harder. As she grew older, public attention intensified. By her teenage years, cameras followed nearly every step she took. Her clothing choices became headlines. Her friendships sparked rumors. Even ordinary nights out turned into international gossip. Monaco itself was becoming a global playground for the rich and famous, and the royal family stood at the center of it all. At the same time, Caroline was far more intelligent than most magazines ever acknowledged. She excelled in school and developed strong interests in philosophy, psychology, literature, and languages. But the media rarely focused on that side of her. Glamorous photographs sold more papers than academic success ever could. It was a frustrating contradiction. The world saw beauty and luxury. Very few noticed the thoughtful young woman. Beneath the headlines, then there were the endless comparisons to Grace Kelly. Imagine growing up while the entire world constantly measured you against one of Hollywood's most iconic women, hairstyles, fashion, behavior, relationships. Every detail became a comparison. Even Grace herself reportedly worried about the pressure placed on her children. Fame already came with intense scrutiny. Royal life only multiplied it. Despite the glamorous image, loneliness quietly followed Caroline through much of her youth. Security, tradition, and endless public attention made normal freedom almost impossible. Even ordinary teenage rebellion became international news. And maybe that explains why fascination with Caroline never faded. People sensed there was something deeper hidden behind the royal image, something fragile beneath the elegance. And nowhere did that become more obvious than during her first marriage. In 1978, the world watched Princess Caroline marry French businessman Philippe Junot. She was only 21 years old. The wedding looked like another royal fantasy brought to life. Cameras filled the streets. Aristocrats and celebrities arrived from across Europe. Monaco sparkled like a movie set. But behind the luxury, serious doubts already existed. Junot was nearly 20 years older and known for his flashy nightlife lifestyle. Parties, glamorous social circles, and rumors surrounded him long before the wedding. Even inside royal circles, many reportedly worried the marriage would not last. Grace Kelly herself was said to feel deeply uneasy. Maybe a mother's instincts saw trouble coming before anyone else did. Still, the wedding moved forward. Every photograph projected perfection, smiles, elegance, wealth, sophistication. But once the honeymoon began, reality reportedly hit fast. According to reports, intimate honeymoon photographs somehow made their way into tabloids after a photographer gained access during private moments. For Caroline, the humiliation was devastating. Think about that for a second. At only 21 years old, already living under constant public pressure, she suddenly discovered that even her most personal moments could become entertainment for strangers around the world. That kind of exposure changes a person. Trust becomes harder. Privacy starts feeling impossible. And that was only the beginning. As months passed, cracks in the marriage became impossible to ignore. Their lifestyles reportedly clashed badly. Caroline came from a world built on duty, structure, and royal expectations. Jono represented freedom, unpredictability, and nightlife. Public appearances continued for a while, but rumors never stopped. Then in 1980, less than 2 years after the grand wedding, the marriage collapsed. The fairy tale was over almost as quickly as it began, and maybe the saddest part is how young Caroline really was through all of it. One moment she stood inside a dream wedding admired by millions. The next she faced humiliation, heartbreak, and public separation under global scrutiny. It became another reminder that crowns and palaces cannot protect anyone from emotional pain. But what happened next would bring a tragedy far worse than divorce. After her first marriage ended, Caroline eventually found love again with Stefano Casiraghi, an Italian businessman and sportsman. Unlike the chaos surrounding her previous relationship, Stefano brought stability and warmth into her life. Their romance grew more quietly, away from the intense spectacle of royal gossip. Together they seemed genuinely happy. They married in 1983 and built a family with their 3 children, Andrea, Charlotte, and Pierre. Stefano became a grounding force in Caroline's life. Friends and observers often described their relationship as real love, something rare within the pressures of royalty. For a while it seemed Caroline had finally found peace. The couple worked hard to create a more balanced upbringing for their children. Caroline wanted them to experience more affection and normalcy than she herself had known growing up inside palace walls. Stefano supported her through the emotional weight of royal life and helped her feel protected from the chaos surrounding public attention. Then, everything shattered. On October 3, 1990, Stefano died in a violent speedboat accident near Monaco. He was only 30 years old. The tragedy stunned the entire country. And for Caroline, the loss reopened wounds that had barely healed after the death of her mother, Grace Kelly, who had died in a car accident just 8 years earlier. Suddenly, Caroline found herself a widow with 3 young children. The grief reportedly transformed her completely. She withdrew from public life and moved quietly to a village in France, searching for privacy and peace far away from cameras. People who saw her during that time described a woman carrying unbearable sorrow behind silent composure. And honestly, how many people could survive that kind of loss without breaking apart completely? But slowly, Caroline returned to public life. Instead of dramatic speeches or emotional interviews, she focused her energy on humanitarian work, education, and the arts. Over time, the public image surrounding her began to change. She was no longer viewed simply as a glamorous royal figure, surrounded by scandal and tragedy. People started seeing something deeper: strength, grace, endurance. Years later, in 1999, Caroline married Prince Ernst August of Hanover. That relationship faced its own difficulties, including periods of separation and tension. Yet through every chapter of her life, Caroline continued carrying herself with remarkable dignity, and perhaps that became the most defining part of her story. Her children eventually grew into major public figures themselves, continuing the Grimaldi legacy while building lives of their own. Meanwhile, Caroline devoted herself to cultural and charitable causes. She supported the arts, humanitarian organizations, and the Princess Grace Foundation, which honors her mother's memory by helping young artists pursue their dreams. But even today, many people still misunderstand her story. They remember the glamour, the photographs, the royal elegance. What they often miss is the emotional weight behind it all, because Princess Caroline's life was never a simple fairy tale. It was the story of a woman raised under impossible expectations. A daughter constantly compared to a legendary mother, A young bride whose first marriage collapsed under public humiliation. A widow forced to rebuild her life after devastating loss. And through every heartbreak, every scandal, and every tragedy, she somehow continued moving forward.